improvement. We are really thankful to have you here and we look forward to the insights today. But first, let us welcome Professor Thompson, the Principal Investigator for our research. Thank you all for being here.
We're really thrilled to have this opportunity to present our research with you. This is 5 years, it's actually about 10 years in the making, but we have this opportunity to talk about the last 5 years in particular and how we've developed this network improvement community. We are looking at the improvement of science instruction, both in terms of, I think it has broader applicability than just science instruction though. So I wanted to see a little bit of hands of who we are in here because it's such a, when you engage in educational reform at the systems level, you get such a conglomerate. In fact, you need different kinds of expertise. So I just wondered how many people are at leadership, curriculum instruction, or professional learning environments, anyone from English language learners, some focus there, and anyone else engaged in research practice partnerships. Super. Well, welcome. We will be drawing on all forms of these kinds of expertise. In fact, that's really, we're all a team from the University of Washington, and that represents all forms of expertise that we have here too. I think you also see that part of what we're bringing today is looking at RPP, our research practice partnership from methodologically, we're trying some new things around social networking analysis too, so we're excited to share that. So in a network improvement community, network improvement communities have multiple levels of improvement that we're working on. There we go. And so in NICs there, in each level you're working on improvement. And so for us, we're really thinking about equitable knowledge building and what does that look like in a system. And so for us, we're thinking about what does that look like at the classroom level? Meaning how do we both push the boundaries of what kids are asked to do? How do we involve them in designing, writing rich explanations for puzzling phenomena over multiple weeks of, they've done multiple weeks of investigation. How do they come together and write and discuss big ideas of science that can't be Googled? Like, how do we engage them in those tough conversations? And also for us, how do we attend to the scaffolding that's necessary for partnering with our English language learners and bilingual students? And what are their language resources? So we're thinking about improvement at the classroom level. We're also thinking about improvement in terms of professional learning communities and how we bring teams together. So in our partnerships in each school, we have not only the secondary science teachers from that school, but also a science coach, an EL coach. We tried to bring in the administrators into the work too, and then researchers. So we're all in it together. But that's a different way, and there's lots of navigation and different kinds of expertise that we're coming together. So we're looking at the improvement. There's a couple chairs if you want to venture up to the front. So we're also looking at improvement of professional learning communities and how we really share expertise with one another. And for us, we also have to think about, since we're this NIC, this network improvement community is focused at a district level, so we had to think about how do we share knowledge across the district. So we've invested in one school, they gain some traction, then how do we move those practices, both the intellectual and the technical work, how do we move it from one school to another? For our network improvement community, we're really building on about 10 years of work around looking at how teachers use what we're calling ambitious science teaching. We've really partnered with teachers for about 10 years to understand different practices that they'll use. But then in the partnership work, what we found is that the kinds of practices that we defined even in our book are a different grain size. We had to work on smaller grain size practices in practice with teachers. And that's really where we've drawn a lot on improvement science to think about not how do we just disseminate good practices, but how do we work on the adaptation and improvement, and what are those feedback mechanisms for continuing to improve those practices. Our research practice partnership is with a school district that's about 18,000, and in Seattle, we're situated around the SeaTac airport. About 72% of the students are free and reduced lunch. About 25% of the students are ELL, and unlike other parts of the country, we have multiple languages, 25 plus languages spoken in a school. And so the way that we think about language learning is it has to be about multiple different languages. Over time, we have built some supports, and these are going to be important for the other discussions because it's what holds some of the knowledge. So the supports that we put in place, these social structures, really support, are working on this improvement of science teaching, but they're at the now, sort of what you're seeing up here is our professional learning model that's been implemented in all secondary schools throughout this district. So in what's exciting for us, what is representative up here, I'll walk you through it, is actually the model that is in play now. We are 2 years past our grant funding, but it is still being sustained. So there's value in it, but let me break it down for you. One is we use these studio models. Now we operate with, the district is able to sustain 2 studios per school. That's really modeled after lesson study. That's how teachers come together. We teach the same lesson twice in the same day. This is really deep, embedded work that we're doing. This is not PD after school. This is elbow to elbow, researchers and teachers and coaches all writing units of instruction, all co-teaching together, debriefing kids' work together. So studios are one form that we put into place. The school district didn't have coaching, secondary science coaching, before we started. And so that was something that was put into play. And we defined a coach really as somebody who would partner in co-teaching. So it's not a coach who's sitting in the back. It is literally someone who is teaching with experienced teachers up front. And so there's coaching support through here that has also been sustained by the district. In fact, the number of coaches is growing. And we, because we were working on networking across multiple schools, it was important for us to put district-wide convenings. So times where teachers from all different schools, all the different secondary science teachers could come together to share their work. And then you'll see the stars here is where we started implementing principal walks, because that's a routine that principals do, so we joined them in walking together and building out some tools around that. So those are some of the social structures that you'll hear through the presentations today. The overarching sort of big story around student improvement is, because we all need to keep our eye on what are we seeing changes for kids. We can tell you about classroom stories, but it also showed up in the data for the kids' test scores too at the 8th grade and 10th grade level. So what we saw interestingly was that for teams who had partnered together as our research practice teams, for 2 years, there was a bump in test scores about 2.6 years. Every year after that, there was an 8% increase. So it's a story about momentum too, and really building within the schools and across the district. And that was regardless of the socioeconomic status of the school. Briefly, what's behind those numbers is really a story about teacher collaboration, teachers working together deeply in their work. This is the 5-year story of using social networking analysis. And let me walk you through a couple things. Liz will do a deeper dive with us into the social networking analysis, but I'll use it to tell a little bit about the story too. We started out working with just a couple schools, developing the studio model, Then we introduce the coaches. Those are the purple squares. And you can see just how important they are to the network for having ideas travel across schools. And we are in the yellow stars. And you can see that over time, the coaches and the researchers sort of are maintained as being important. So, you know, in some models you think about how do you fade researchers out. We actually found that it was important for us to stay and just tweak how we were interacting with both the coaches and the teachers. The other piece that by year 3 we had involved all of the schools. We started with 2, we worked up to 8 of the schools that we were partnering with, and then in year 4 it's a little harder to see here, but what you start to see is some of the teachers, their nodes on here are larger. That means that they've been nominated more, which means that we're starting to develop a model that is where teachers are nominating one another more as being important to the improvement work, which is important for sustainability, right? We need the teachers to be growing in importance in the network. So we're going to talk a lot about ties. Those are the links that you see between those different nodes. I wanted to define what a tie was and how we looked at it. For us, we looked at a tie as being to what degree were teachers working on examining student work. For us, it's very central to have kids work right in front of us at all times. That way, we're not talking about what teachers do. We're talking about how kids are learning. Sharing materials is sort of a common thing that often teachers do with one another, but we were interested in that. How much does that persist in the network, as well as co-generating instructional new materials together. So again, this is in a tie. How much are teachers working on unpacking and understanding science content was another one. So it's actually pretty rare for a group of science teachers to really get together and say, let's push the boundaries of what science we know together. What are our outer boundaries and what do we need to go look up before we go teach it? So we were looking at that, and then we also looked at to what degree in those ties were they working on the improvement of EL instruction. We've walked you through this as a driver diagram in improvement in science language. This is our overarching goal was to improve all students' written and spoken science explanations, arguments, and models for all kids and for EL students in particular. And we ended up, this is a product of what happened after 5 years. This is now part of what can travel, but this is 5 years in one slide. We were able to name what we thought were the primary drivers, so what's going to influence this overarching goal, making the language of science explicit, revising models with evidence. And then the work of the NIC was really generating these practices and sets of tools and sets of inquiries that lived with those practices. So, and you can see here too, like the number of schools that were working on those practices per year. So we're interested in which practices got taken up, how did they move across the different schools. Today you'll hear about Jen's going to talk about structured talk for how and why reasoning. Suyan is going to talk about this idea of working with models in classrooms. Those were both central to different schools at different times in the network. The other piece that you'll hear today is around the development of tools. And tools, they carry knowledge with them. One of the tools that was central to this network was what we call a model template, which actually represents a way of teaching science too, because we have students have a puzzling phenomena for an entire unit of instruction. The kids model what they can and can't see happening, in this case about biofuel.